Hello and welcome back. I do want to apologize for that stopping like mid-sentence. You can't see how much time is left on the video, and I definitely thought I had a few more minutes. But just to wrap up this slide, do students need to learn any background knowledge? That's something that we talked about in the last video. And then lastly, what materials will the students need? This isn't something that you can just kind of pull together a few minutes before your students walk in, because most likely you're going to have to scrounge up some materials, and there's a good amount of prep work that goes into it. So I would just make sure you have everything you need before you start your STEAM lesson. When it comes to choosing a standard, your asterisk is key. In the Alabama State Standards, and I'm not sure if it's all the standards, I know it is with the Alabama State Standards, there's an asterisk at the end of what's called the engineering standards. So the engineering standards are the ones that are going to be best to do a STEAM lesson with. They're not the only ones you can do a STEAM lesson with, but if you're kind of stressing out about how to incorporate STEAM in your classroom, look for those, and it's definitely going to be easier to find STEAM lessons online already made, or to come up with your own STEAM lesson using the standards that have asterisks on them. So these are the ones for third grade, and you can kind of see by reading through these how you could incorporate a STEAM lesson using them. So apply scientific ideas about magnets to solve a problem through an engineering design project. Problem-based projects. It's just a lot easier to create STEAM lessons with stuff like that. And then 312 is one of my favorites. Evaluate engineered solutions to a problem created by environmental changes and any resulting impacts on the types and density of plant and animal populations living in the environment. So there's a lot of different things you can do there. And you also have to remember that there's so many different parts with these standards that you can do a STEAM lesson for different parts of them. So with that one, you could really focus on the density of populations living in the environment, or you can really focus on the environmental changes. I'm not going to read through all of these, but they're definitely here for you to look at. In the fourth grade, design, construct, and test, develop and use models, or formulate and evaluate solutions. It's just those keywords that make it a lot easier for you to figure out a project or something for your students to engineer, build, manipulate using those standards. It makes a lot more sense in my opinion, and I think that most teachers would find it easier. Fifth grade, there's not as many. They kind of start to dwindle down, the ones with asterisks, but that doesn't mean that there's not other options for you. So in fifth grade, it's design and conduct a test, and design solutions, test, and revise a process for cleaning a polluted environment. I love that standard. There's so many different ways you can go with that. And a polluted environment is a very hot topic right now. So it's really easy to figure out what to do with that. Sixth grade, there's only one, and it's implement scientific principles to design processes for monitoring and minimizing human impact on the environment. Once again, very hot topic. I think it's something that students would really feel connected to and feel a need to figure out a solution for that. So, STEAM activities for your upper elementary classroom, there are so many. And if you just Google them, then hundreds will pop up. And it's so easy to figure them out yourself. So I just want to inspire you, get your creative juices flowing so you can figure out different STEAM activities that you can do depending on your curriculum and what you're set up to do for the next year. So this is one that a friend of mine did, and it's create an earthquake-resistant structure. I think that this is so cool. And so the way that I laid this out, I just did the STEAM, like I said, how I plan mine, just to make sure we're checking all the boxes there. So what he did is he had his students create an earthquake-resistant structure using different materials. You can use like toothpicks and marshmallows. You can use popsicle sticks. You can use straws and like not let them use any kind of glue, but them have to like bind the straws together by tying them and braiding them and stuff like that. I've seen people do that, and it gets very tricky. But science, students need to know what an earthquake is. That's science. It's a natural disaster that happens on our planet, and it's something that students definitely need some background knowledge on. Technology, The students can video while they test their structures. They can research earthquakes, and they can research earthquake-resistant buildings or skyscrapers that exist in the world to see how those are built and see if they can use those as inspiration. Engineering, students can build a structure that will withstand an earthquake without collapsing. That's pretty much what we're asking them to do, and that's engineering, is when you're building something like that. Art, creativity in the materials that you're using or in the structure being built. It's also the process that you're using to build it. That's definitely art. Coming up with a way and just the whole process in which you figure out how to do it. And then lastly, math. Like I said before, math is more than just formulas and numbers. It's also geometry and shape. So what shaped structure would be the most sound or the most earthquake resistant structure? So you have to think about which ones would collapse in on themselves, which one would be the most sturdy. And when you test these, you can do such fun stuff like shaking a box or like with their structure in it, or letting another group figure out how they're going to test their structure. And it can be really fun. And a lot of times it's really heartbreaking when students see their structures break. But I would like to create a time afterwards for them to either fix their structure and try to rebuild it stronger, or figure out what happened and what went wrong. This one is one that I did with my students: build a dam that can hold water in a container. So the way that I did it, the shoebox sized containers is what I gave each group, and they had to build a wall in the middle so that when we poured water in one side, no water got into the other side. So we first went over a little bit of background knowledge about what the purpose of a dam is, how some dams control water level. So this side the water will be up here and this side it'll be down here, and this water can't get through. But there's also dams that keep water from flooding different cities. It just depends on where it's at, and there's different types of dams, and our students learned a little bit about that before we started the project. Technology, of course, research, that's always kind of a given when it comes to STEAM projects, is them figuring out what they're going to do and researching it first. But then it's playing their test videos in slow motion to view mistakes if they fail. So that's what we did with mine. We videoed it, and then if water did get through, they played it back in slow motion to see where the water started to seep through, so that they could go back and patch those spots or fix them. The biggest issue that we had was we used air dry clay, and everybody thought that that would seal the water out, so they used it on their edges. And then when it got wet, the water just went right through the air dry clay because it wasn't dry. It was still tacky. So we had a lot of students fail, but that's okay. That's all part of the process. Next is engineering, and that's building a structure that will keep water from leaking through. Like I said, engineering really is the actual building part. But remember, there's also the design process and hypothesizing and the discoveries that they make afterwards. All of that is part of STEAM. Engineering is just the actual building. It's not the whole thing, though. And then art, it's the whole process, pretty much, the creativity in which the materials were used, or the prettiest dam if you're doing younger students. And then in math, how much water could the dam hold before it collapsed? That's what I did for mine. So we had water in something that we were could measure the amount of water, and then we subtracted how much we poured out before their dams leaked or collapsed. Math, so easy to incorporate math in something like that. And then the next one that I have, create a device that will filter pollution out of water. So this one is something, like I said, a lot of students are going to feel involved and connected to, because it's such a big thing that our oceans are filled with plastic. Our water has oil in it. Our water has bacteria in it. And so science, why is our water dirty? What are we doing that's making our water dirty? More importantly, how does it become drinking water? How do we clean it? And I think students are going to need to know that before they can figure out how to filter pollution out of the water. For this one, I decided that I thought it would be really cool to incorporate a 3D printer if you were blessed enough to have one. But that doesn't mean you can't do this if you don't. So for technology, of course, research. And then I said creating a design on a 3D printing website. So there's a lot of different ones out there that you can look at. And most of them are free for students. If not, then like the teacher can purchase a subscription and their whole class would be able to use it. So it's a pretty good deal. Um, and then the engineering is the actual building of the filter using different materials or using a 3D printer. If you don't have a 3D printer, stuff like coffee filters or a strainer, cheesecloth, all that kind of stuff is definitely going to filter pollution out of water. And that's where students are going to start thinking about maybe this will get the big pieces of trash out, but is it really going to get the oil out, or is it really going to get the bacteria out? And how can I truly make this water free of pollution? Art, the creativity in which the materials were used. And like I said before, the whole creative process is a form of the arts. And then in math, a lot of programming goes on with 3D printers, and that's a really easy way to incorporate math. If not, you could always give students a budget and say you only have this much money to buy materials, so you can't use $10 worth of cheesecloth when you only have $8 to spend. Something easy like that is a great way to incorporate math. And it's also very real world. Students really connect to that because that's something that they have to live with every day. This one, build a boat that will carry objects across water. Another one of my friends did this, and their students loved it. They thought it was so much fun. So in science, how do you prevent a boat from sinking in the first place? What makes boats float? Everybody knows you can't have a hole in a boat, but why? Asking your students to explain stuff like that really gets them thinking and gets them to research a little bit more. They can obviously research through technology. And when I say research with technology, I do recommend picking some pre-read links or pre-read articles to make sure that everything's appropriate and students aren't going to blindside you with some crazy website that they found. Because when you're using the internet, you have to be very careful with your students. But how would the boat be propelled forward? That's also a form of technology. How are you going to get the boat to move? Are you going to use wind or electricity? How would you get that boat to move? And that's a really easy way to incorporate robotics as long as it's safe because it's on the water. You really got to make sure your boat doesn't sink then. You can also incorporate art with the creativity in which the materials are used or the creative process as a whole. You can also decorate your boats, put people in your boats, whatever you want to do, especially with third, fourth grade students. They're still going to be really into stuff like that. And then in math, would the weight of the objects affect the boat from sinking? That makes a big difference when you say that will carry objects. If it's bricks, then their boat that they made with paper might sink. Whereas if it's like blocks, it might not. So it just makes a difference and is something for them to think about. How heavy does the object have to be to make the boat sink? So this is the part of my presentation where I would let the audience plan their own. So I would say, all right, now it's your turn. And I would get them in groups and have them plan a STEAM lesson. They could use one of the standards that I had mentioned before, or they could find their own standard that's not one of the engineering standards. And I would have templates for them that say STEAM, STEAM, and places for them to write out how they're incorporating each one. And then they would take turns presenting it to the audience. We could ask questions, we could make them think a little bit, and a lot of teachers would go home with some really awesome lessons that they can bring back to their classroom. And then these are the resources that I have. All of these resources are super awesome. Edutopia is also the video that I used from before, and I just really love that website. It has a lot of great things, especially on STEAM and a lot of other elementary education topics. So I definitely recommend, if you have time, going through and reading some of these articles if you're still a little confused on STEAM, you're not sure what to do. And then the handout that I have is also super helpful. It has 5 different QR codes, and they're all different articles about what STEAM is, how to incorporate it into your classroom, a lot of different ideas, and then more like differentiation on how to really customize it to your classroom. Because, like I said, a lot of students aren't going to understand. A lot of teachers aren't going to understand how to change STEAM for their classroom, and those articles are very helpful. So if you are interested in incorporating STEAM into your classroom, I would definitely take a look at these or at the handout that's